Welcome back to the Lantern Rouge Cycling Podcast. I've just arrived in Sydney. The Austrian team, I think, with a few riders, maybe some junior riders, was on my flight. They're in economy with me though, so how their legs will be feeling, I'm not so sure. Before I don't know if they're doing the TT on the weekend. That's what this podcast will be about: the time trial, men and women's elite time trials in this year's World Championships in Wollongong. And before we get into that, I'll mention our show partner, Zwift. We've mentioned the upcoming changes to Zwift, including the ability to race your segment personal bests, and there's never been a better time to start training indoors, particularly with the torrential rain that greeted me upon my return to Australia, albeit temporary return. Zwift have announced a new smart trainer too. The Zwift Hub will be on sale from October 3rd in just over 2 weeks. Zwift are breaking down the barriers by making this new trainer cheaper and easier to set up than any other trainer on the market, even coming pre installed with your cassette of choice. To sign up for notifications for when Zwift Hub goes on sale, or indeed to find out more about Zwift or to get a free 7-day trial, you can go to Zwift.com through the link down below. But anyway, TT course, it is the same for men and women: 34 Ks, 310 meters elevation. It has a few turns with some long straightaways as well, including a 700 meter, 6.7% climb they do twice. Just kind of a mixed standard course, not pancake flat, not too technical. It's on the coast, doubles back, so it's not out and back. What do you make of it, Benji?
When I look at the parkour, I see a parkour of, 34 kilometers. What does that mean? It's shorter than last year. I think 43 was last year. I think the year before was shorter, was in roughly the 31-kilometer area. And then the one before was Harrogate, that really long one, the 54-kilometer one, where we had Remco Evenepoel's first appearance in the World Championships ITT, if my memory serves me right. But having all these World Championships, I tend to look at the NFL meters, like the altitude meters, a bit to see how hard the parkour is. And when I compared this one, Wollongong 2022, compared to the previous ones, it's one with a notable amount of altitude meters, roughly 325 altitude meters, mainly that climb you mentioned, the climb of Mount Ounslet, that 700 meters climb. And that does quite a bit for that. But I also think that throughout the parkour itself, throughout this 17-kilometer loop that we have twice, we've got some roads that go a bit more up than you would expect when looking at the profile. And I think it's kind of like, remember when we had the World Championships in Leuven last year? In the road race, there were some roads in Leuven that were like slightly uphill, but on the profile, they would be flat, for example. And I think that kind of will also influence this because with all these corners, like I count like more than 20 proper bends in a 17-kilometer loop, so times two, which means 40 bends in 34 kilometers. That's one per, a bit more than one per kilometer, which means that you don't have like these 3 kilometer stretches that a rider can push completely through. I think the last 5 kilometers has more of that, of these 70K loops where the riders can have more of a constant power output. But with all these corners, I do think that will affect the time trial quite a bit. You said not too technical. How do you see these corners play into that? Because I'd say it's not too technical, but it's also not completely not technical.
Yeah, gotta remember it's not Europe, so the roads are built a little bit differently, i.e., they fit two cars, not one, down at a time. So it is different. Now, that being said, like the Imola one, I don't remember them being too narrow either. I can't remember the Leuven one exactly. Um, but you're right, there's still a lot of corners. It, of course, depends. If it's raining, they slow down even more the average speed. And who does this benefit in the men's race? Who does this benefit? Who does this hurt? The corners, I think, helps Wout van Aert. I think he corners better than Ganna, for example. Evenepoel, I think on balance prefers less corners and just the long straights as well. But then the hills, I think I don't have the Deneville in front of me, but I do have the average speeds. In 2021, the Leuven TT was faster despite being 12 Ks longer than the Imola TT. It was faster average by 2 kilometers an hour, 54.3 for Ganna, and that was only 6 seconds ahead of Wout van Aert on that pancake flat course. And that had some technical sections, but also long, long straights. In Imola, he was 26 seconds, I think, ahead of Wout van Aert on a hillier course with also a 6% 600-meter climb over less distance. So he beat Wout by much, much more on the Imola course. That being said, that's 2 years ago. Wout might have improved. But Evenepoel, we haven't seen on a hilly course at the World Champs since Harrogate. Is that right? He didn't do 2021 because of Giro crash, or
Yeah.
no? That's right. He didn't do 2020 because of Giro crash. I'm so confused by the years. When Evenepoel crashed, did he? When was World Champs in pandemic? Was it before or after Lombardia?
It should be before Lombardia, right?
Well, he
I don't
didn't do the
know.
World
We'll have
Champs
to look it
TT,
up.
so I'm going to say that I'm correct. So I don't know. Who do you think this benefits the most? What would Ganna have been looking for? I think Ganna would have preferred just a 60-kilometer flat straight line TT. I think this is. I just don't think this is an extreme course in any direction. I think it's just like a standard course, just quite short for World Champs.
Yeah, I think so as well. It's pretty average course based on the hills, pretty average course when it comes to the straight lines. I agree that again, I would want more straight lines so that he can really get that constant power output right, because I think that's a big advantage between Genna and, for example, other riders that try and benefit from acceleration out of corners, and those riders that try to benefit from the acceleration out of corners. Those would benefit more on a parkour that is more cornery and so forth. So the initial part of this loop compared to the latter part of this loop. So I think we see the strengths of both play up in this loop. It's set in two directions, you know. Like I think both is present, but I tend to lean towards a balanced parkour mainly because of what you said when it comes to the width of the roads and so forth. Because if the road is wider, then you can keep the speed in the corners as well. It's if a 90-degree corner is super sharp, like if it's 90-degree, that's what a 90-degree corner is. Then if it's a one car wide road, then you need to take your corner properly and you need to make sure you lower your speed before the corner and so forth. If it's a two-car wide road, then you can take that corner with a lot more speed because you've got more space to come out of the corner with. So I think that values a lot to this parkour. And if every single road after each corner is wider, then they can go to these corners with higher speed, which means that it will likely be beneficial for riders that can also keep that constant power output out. So I might be leaning more towards the people that can put that constant power output out. But how about we talk through the riders that are actually planning to ride this versus some that won't be riding and see what do we think about their current form? What do we think about what they can do on this parkour, for example? And the first rider I would want to be talking about when it comes to the favorites is one that won last year, for example, Filippo Ganna. He's won the World Championships multiple times right now. He's one of those riders that I would consider the riders that want that constant power output, but he's proven already that even in prologues and so forth with a bit more corners, he can also get his power output right. So where would you rate him on this parkour? Definitely knowing he hasn't had the best season so far.
I think if Evenepoel hadn't done the Vuelta, I would have Evenepoel as the favourite, but it has to matter, and the market suggests that it does. Ganna the slight favourite at 225 ahead of Evenepoel and 250, Kung 750, Pogacar 750, Bissiger 9, Hayter 15, and then it's the best of the rest. Yeah, I would say you look at Ganna's prep. He's done Europeans, third there. Well, he came second to Kung there last year before winning Worlds. He then did Deutschland Tour, won the prologue, and was kind of chilling. And that was after, oh, he had 2, 3 weeks after the Tour de France, where I must say he was quite disappointing. And so that's the big question mark for me is I do wonder whether how much it matters, and every second matters in World Champs. 6 seconds mattered last year. How much benefit Ganna has had from his ideal prep into races like the Giro, where he doesn't meet as stiff a competition, and then the Tour de France, he was found wanting in both time trials by a lot. And but then he's had an ideal prep into Worlds again, it looks like. So that's just advantage him over Evenepoel. And Pogacar almost has had a better preparation than Evenepoel, even if this might not have been his target. Kung did his prep, sorry, just quickly, he did Tour de Doubs. He's done some French smaller races. He was second at European Continental Champs. Bissiger won that. That was a 24K course. He beat Kung by a second, the poor guy. And he did the tour as well, where he was way off the mark in both TTs. I don't know if he had a mechanical in either and didn't make the top 10. So I think Gunner has to be the favourite, Benji. But again, I think he looks, for some reason, he looks really beatable this year. And it might have been the same thing as before last year when he lost Eurochess. But to me, Gunner just seems a lot more beatable. And I think that is reflected in his price.
Yeah, I think it's also reflected in his results this year, and that is also reflecting into what people expect from this race from Agana. But I also agree that he's one of the riders, if not the rider, that I put on the top pedestal because I've also got a lot of question marks when it comes to other riders, you know. Now, Remco Evenepoel, you mentioned him, for example. He's one of the riders with a major question mark for me where I don't know what he's going to be like, knowing he arrived, I think, on Wednesday in Australia after coming from La Vuelta a España last Sunday, winning that 21 stages. That's a significant amount of stages in one go, and limited rest afterwards, limited preparation after that Vuelta towards this Australian Championships, climatizing towards Australia and so forth. I also like, there's also the aspect, Pogacar, for example, did Quebec and Montreal. Evenepoel did the Vuelta. So I'm guessing that Evenepoel flew eastern direction to Australia, while Pogacar flew western direction to Australia. Do you think that has an effect?
Well, it depends when your flight got in. I had an evening flight yesterday from the Evenepoel direction from Europe, and it's not been too bad. If you arrive in the morning, though, you're in trouble for a few days. I don't know. I think the flight from Canada, yeah, theoretically shouldn't be as bad if you came in that direction. Pogacar. The question is, like, Evenepoel is a better time trialist than Pogacar, but Pogacar should be fresher. Pogacar also, I would think, like, Pogacar's not in Tour de France shape. I don't mean he's not in good shape. I mean, I don't know either of their weights. But if I was Pogacar, why would you be trying to get to like the lightest possible weight for a world championships where you need
Yeah.
punch, where you need sprint for a TT that's 9 meters elevation per kilometer, not 27 meters elevation per kilometer like Planche de Belfi. Evenepoel, on the other hand, I don't know if you say maintained weight during the Vuelta, he'll be at like a pretty low weight. So how does that impact it as well? His TT in Leuven last year, I don't think he was the same weight as he is right now. So whether that hurts him on the flat, it didn't in the Vuelta. He smashed that. It's kind of hard. It's like horse handicapping in that, like, he wasn't against Kung. He was
Yeah.
against injured Roglic in the Vuelta TT, beat him by 45 seconds. How do you extrapolate that to an against a primed Ganna? I don't know. Weather, by the way, it's not Australian outrageously hot. In fact, it's been raining quite a bit. So that's why I think the big dark horse for this TT and who I think will win if there is a single drop of rain, a single drop, I think Pogacar wins the World Champs TT. Because there's Ganna in the rain in the corners, he loses like 3 seconds per corner. And Evenepoel, I'm a bit cautious maybe, and his form. Pogacar is, you saw on the Tour de France opening prologue, just unreal. So I'm going with Pogacar if it's any moisture, and Evenepoel I think wins. Otherwise, Ganna probably do the business now. What do you think?
Well, before I go further, I wanna correct it. As my Flemish soul, I want to mention that it's technically not the Leuven IT last year. It's technically in Brugge. Just want to mention that so I don't have angry Flemish
Sorry,
people in the
brother.
comments section. But I do think when it comes to Pogacar, there's also the aspect of like this man's also focusing on the road race afterwards. And you say when it comes to rain, yes, on paper that would benefit a Pogacar. Will he consider the rain as something where he's like, I need to make sure I survive until the road race?
No,
I think that won't have an
I don't think
effect.
he would.
Agreed. I think that won't have an effect in this race. I think Pogacar is the kind of rider that would not consider that, that would not keep that in his mind, and that would go all out for the victory regardless of that rain being on the road. And I think we've seen that quite a few times in the past where in rainy races before a bigger goal, he would still go all out to try and win it. So in this sense, I would also see it that way. And when it comes to the parkour as well, like 34 kilometers, not the craziest and so forth. Are there riders that you think might surprise that we haven't mentioned yet? Like for example, Stefan Bissiger, when it rains, I fear for his life. Like based on the time trials we've seen from him this year, I think in that Paris-Nice time trial or something where he slid in the corner, and then the Tour de France prologue where
Crashed
he
twice,
had
right?
trouble. Yeah, like was that equipment related or was that Bissiger related?
I mean, I don't know. You'd hope hope they didn't have it at 100 psi, but it didn't look good, did it? In that Tour de France TT, he just literally couldn't corner at any speed. I don't know. I Bissiger's a hard one for me because, like, where's Geraint Thomas? Is he here? Where are you, Geraint Thomas? Why isn't he doing this? Like,
Good
I know
question.
he's probably like the shape he had the tour. He's like, I'm not carrying that for another couple of months. One thing on sorry, the just one anecdote that is just one data point on the I said Ghana beat Wout by more in Imola. I forgot 2020. Wout finished the Tour de France literally 4 days before that. Like,
Yeah.
so that was a crazy year. I mean, still, I don't know. Maybe last year it was close on the flat.
I also want to mention a rider that we haven't talked about too much, but I feel like he's a dark horse for at least the podium, and that's Ethan Hayter. The only issue I have with him is that I don't know what his form is like after being in the Vuelta and stepping out just before the time trial when it comes to COVID. So the question is, did that impact him? I don't know. Did that impact him enough to set him off a few percentages when it comes to the time trial that comes up in the World Championships? I don't know, but a peak Hater I would put on the podium here. Is that too high for Hater, or do you think that's a valid prediction for Ethan Hater? Because his time trials in the past have been pretty damn significant, and I feel like he's the kind of rider that can both have the explosivity out of the corners a bit and both have the pure constant power output on straighter roads as well.
I think that's right. Definitely a candidate for the podium. The Algarve TT that had Evenepoel and Kung there, and he came third. So he might need a complete collapse from a Kung, and then he slips onto the podium because it's there's a few people missing. Roglic is not here after crashing in the Vuelta. I'm not sure if he would have done it plus the road race. Thomas, as I said, was missing. Thomas Magic TT. Dumoulin retired. This was supposed to be his big target. I think it might have suited him. And of course, Wout van Aert is not here, who would have been a co-favorite. I don't know where he would have fit in the odds, but he wouldn't have been far from Evenepoel and Ganna, probably the same. What do you make of that, Benji? Given I think there is a week or so between the TT and the road race, Van Aert choosing to skip the TT this year after a couple of seconds in a row.
He's doing that to better his chances of winning the road race. And the question there is like, is it worth doing that? And I think it's a question that is annoying to answer because it's the results that will define whether it was a good decision or not. We know that he's had a few second places now in World Championships, and he wants that golden medal, that rainbow jersey in the road race so significantly that he puts the time trial aside. A time trial where I'd argue he's co-favorite for if he goes for it.
The
And if
favorite,
not,
I think.
the favorite. Yeah, perhaps you're right. And he's putting that aside to go to the road race in a better form. And I find that always risky. Other riders like a Pogacar is doing both the ITT and the road race. Is it such a danger to do that ITT a week before the road race? I don't know. I'm not his numbers guy. I don't know that, for example. But I will say that I find it very sad for the race to have a rider that is reportedly basically the favorite on paper for this time trial to skip it for the road race because I'd like the World Championships to be a battle between the best riders in the discipline. And seeing a rider skip the ITT for the road race sucks for me. And on the other end, I'm kind of like, yeah, like if he loses the road race now, 100% he's gonna get roasted for skipping the ITT. You know it. Like
But what if
it's so
Evenepoel wins
happening.
though?
What if Evenepoel wins the road race?
Yeah, and the TT.
It's still gonna be joked about that he skipped the ITT for the road race.
Maybe. I mean, in terms of exposure, the road race world champ has to be worth, I reckon, 7 times more than being TT world
Hmm.
champ in terms of exposure. Maybe Alaphilippe doesn't get paid 7 times what Ganna gets paid, but I think road race world champ is significantly more exposure and a bigger deal than TT. That being said, it's still the rainbow bands in, as you said, Benji, one of the important disciplines in the sport. I think he probably would have won on in dry conditions. He had the edge on Evenepoel in terms of preparation, and I think Ganna is just a little bit less this year. And I'm talking 0.1%. And wow, lost by 6 seconds last year. So I think it would have been close. I would have liked to have seen it. But it doesn't matter for Belgium because here's my picks. I think Evenepoel still wins the TT um, ahead of. I don't know, is Kung good? Technically, we haven't really mentioned Stefan Kung, but I guess it's hard to see him winning after the tour and not
Yeah,
beating Bissiger in the Euros. I'm going with Evenepoel narrowly over Ghana. I think Wout would have won. And if it rains, any rain, anything at all, I think Teddy Focaccia wins.
Teddy Pikachu. Okay, I think there's definitely the chances there. Now, when it comes to my picks, as a rider I haven't mentioned that I kind of feel like I must mention. It's a rider that has been doing notably better in time trials this year and is kind of like a far outsider for me for like a dark horse for a podium, and it's Mollema. And it's so like I don't know. He's done so significantly better compared to last year in time trials that it would not shock me that he like betters it by like a 2% to get something out of this. On the other end, it's a notable step, getting 2% better to get that result going. His time trials at the tour were good. Sixth in that 20th stage, for example, 40-kilometer time trial, quite hilly. Just so helps him a bit. But I don't know. I feel like his time trials have gotten better, but a podium might be just above what he might achieve. I'll say perhaps fifth or something, fourth Bauke Mollema. I think that's a possibility there. I think my podium is the following. You're going for Evenepoel? Well, I'd love to see that. I think I'm gonna go for. I think I'm gonna go for Ganna. Ganna's the kind of rider that often before a big goal, he's got like a month of results where you're kind of like, oh, I don't think he's gonna win. Because this time trial was not amazing, for example. He was kind of disappointing at the European Champs, for example. And that leans me towards thinking that he's got his preparation right, that he's got everything right when it comes to his preparation for Wollongong, and that he's going to extend his World Championship reign another year. And I think he's the kind of rider that preps it so perfectly with the singular goal in mind. Obviously, it's not his only goal this year. Next to
Probably
that
his biggest
ITT,
bonus though. Because
that's
he
true.
doesn't, he's not a GC rider, and monuments, he's not winning them either. So this is his big bonus.
Yeah, exactly. Together with perhaps his personal goal of the hour record at some point, which I don't think he should overly focus on because he's probably going to get that regardless. So when it comes to this ITT, I think Ganna's going to win. I think the second spot is going to go towards Remco Evenepoel, and the third spot towards Ethan Hayter. And I might regret not putting Pogacar on the podium, but I'll make it up to him with our preview of the road race later on this week. So for now, that's my podium for this ITT, and I think that's a pretty damn solid pick, I guess.
I'm going Evenepoel, Kung, Pogacar. No Ganner on the podium. He's off the podium. Um,
Oh,
yeah, something
ruthless.
happens. Something happens. Who knows? Anyway, that's the men's ITT. Now, there's no profile rehashing needing to be done for the women's ITT. It's exactly the same as the men's, the 34-kilometer course, with a couple of those Dumfries Avenue lumps and some other lumps and bumps along the way. An intermediate time check at 16 and a half. The big contenders are, of course, Annemiek van Vleuten, who is the favourite. ahead of Marlon Reusser. Reusser has firmed a little bit. Ellen Van Dyke is third favourite. They're all between 250, 275, and 325. So clear it would have been that's what the men's market would have looked like with Van Aert, Evenepoel, and Ganna. Brown is at 9, Faulkner at 15, Kopecky 29. They're the major candidates. I have to mention Kiesenhofer is actually the seventh favourite at 51, just because she's you just got to respect Kiesenhofer at this point. You can't you can't put out too big a price. So last year she actually wasn't the favorite for the TT at all. She was maybe even like third or fourth favorite. But Annemiek van Vleuten put in a good performance. Oh no, sorry, this was in Imola, and then she came third last year, and it was the big battle between the two big rouleurs, Van Dijk and Reusser, who were 10 seconds away from each other, 50k an hour average, the only two riders to do it. Um, who do you like, Benji? Reusser was in. I feel like she was in better form last year, like in the road as well, and how that impacts it. But then she's also been a domestique for SD Works for a lot of this year. Van Vleuten just did the triple. How tired is she? I don't know. Um, what's your reading on who this suits? Because Van Vleuten, I wouldn't say is the best handler. I think Van Dyke is probably the most proficient TT rider, if she doesn't have the most power.
Very possible. I think one of the things we noted last year when it comes to the difference between Marlon Royce and Ella Van Dijk is also the distance of the parcours. And perhaps that's something we based on limited amount of data points, but I'd argue it's still valid from what I can tell so far. It's that the shorter the time trial, well, let's say a 20-25 kilometer time trial for me leans more to a Marlon Royster than a Van Dijk. And the longer it goes afterwards, the more the benefit switches for me towards Van Dijk. And we've seen that in last year's parcours, where initially Reusser was having the upper hand in the first part of the parcours, and towards the second half, Van Dijk passed her and significantly built out a gap on Reusser towards the end of the parcours. And I swear that happened in multiple time trials last year as well. So I've got a feeling that that has an impact here. But the question is, where does this parcours fit in that theory? And 34 kilometers is the kind of parcours where, for me, it leans a bit more to the longer side compared to, well, previous time trials. Last year was a very long one, as in like 43 in total. I'd say that for me, it is balanced between the two, but slightly towards Van Dijk when it comes to the length of this. And when we take a look at, for example, the time trial we had in the European Championships, which was not too long ago, actually, we had a time trial that was, I think it was 23-ish kilometers, roughly 20 kilometers. And that was a flatter parcours. And Reusser had the upper hand there, 6 seconds on Van Dijk. So that's the one where I'm like, it's short enough for a Reusser to take the upper hand there, but the longer it will take, it might lean towards Van Dijk. So between those two, I might put it more in the Van Dijk camp compared to Marlon Reusser this year when it comes to the parcours. First of all, when it comes to those two, do you agree that there's something in the length of the parcours indicating something for these two riders?
Yeah, the Euros to Worlds results seems to indicate that as you go over 30Ks, it seems to benefit Van Dijk. But then again, the margins between the two are so small that it's almost
Yeah.
like who woke up and had a better sleep. These small things, they're so close between each other. I misspoke, by the way, about Van Vleuten. I meant 2018, the Rolly course around Innsbruck, where she beat Van Dyke by like 125 in terms of the world champs. What's also relevant, which I forgot to talk about, was the Olympics ITT, which I forgot was last year. That was 22 Ks, but super hilly, 44K an hour average. She smoked Reusser and Brown and co. I think it's Van Dyke actually. Van Vleuten, she's going to be tired. I think road race is the main priority. I don't think she should be favourite. I think Van Dyke, this is her big target of the year. She's a domestique for a lot of the year. I think the average speed, it's not going to be 43 k's an hour at average. It's got to be like 46 plus, 47s. Um, and I think it's Van Dyke. I don't know why. It's more of a gut instinct thing. We don't see too many TTs, which Van Dyke has rightly complained about in women's World Tour level. What do you, before we give our firm final picks, what do you make of the sort of the underdogs? Brown's at 9. That's actually shorter than I expected. Because, well, I don't I don't really see a way for her to win this race, because it would mean all three above her would have to have a terrible day, or particularly Royce and Van Dyke.
I think so as well. I think what I'm leaning towards for her is that she's looking to fetch that third podium spot on a very good day, for example, if one of the other riders has a bit of a worse day, because getting a podium spot, getting a medal in her own country, that would be a big thing, I would say, here in Wollongong in the ITT. I think that's kind of the goal she should set her mind to, because getting fourth or fifth, it's not really a goal, you know? You might as well try for the medal. And it will not be easy to get that third spot, to be honest. Another chance is also Georgia Baker, same country, also Australian. She's also had pretty damn good TTs this year, but I swear that her Simac Ladies Tour ended with a DNF after a not so great time trial on stage 5. So I'm a bit on the edge when it comes to Georgia Baker. I think beforehand she had great time trials in Tour de Suisse, for example, getting third over a 25-kilometer parkour in Vaduz. And I swear she had some good prologues as well throughout the year. Commonwealth Games got to a fourth. Brown won that, so a better performance by Brown there. But I do dare to say that Baker could be fighting for a top 6, 7 position when it comes to this race. Liana Marquez is also a name I want to mention because she's had damn good time trials already as well. I think she got second in the 17K time trial in Simac Ladies Tour. That was behind the likes of Cordonago, who we won't see at this race because I recall her having COVID or something when it comes to a sickness in the last week, which got her out of the ITT, and all is also now getting her out of the road race, which is really unfortunate to see. I think Marcus got third in the European Championships behind the likes of Royce Van Dijk, not too far behind, half a minute. Gondarago was the one that finished fourth there. Kiesenhofer got fifth there, but for Kiesenhofer, I'm looking at A for seventh or ninth as a position that she's likely to end up at on a parkour like this. Or there are other riders on the parkour where I'm like, oh, this rider could do well. Oh, I don't know. I don't expect a Kopecky to be highly up there. For example, I'm also not looking at a Juliette Labou to be the best time trialist here on paper. I think we've named the names we've had, and a Kristen Faulkner is one I haven't mentioned. I swear that she was looking
She
so
pulled
good at
out
the
of the
start of the
Vuelta.
season. Yeah, she was looking so good at the start of the season. I think she left the Vuelta after suffering for consecutive days of intensity. It was too much for her during La Vuelta, and she hopes that the one-day
Because
race
of
aspect
COVID,
of this
yeah.
time trial would help out. Yeah, she had COVID before the Vuelta, and then she had trouble getting back into the race rhythm or something, if I recall, was what I read up on that. So I don't know. Preseason Faulkner, I would have said, yeah, podium candidate. Now Faulkner, I'm like, I fear for a top 5. I fear that's difficult with the form she has now.
I think she would have, yeah, podiumed. I think she would have beaten Van Vleuten. I'm not sure how AVV will go. She's on the giant setup, and the men's Bex team, the women's Bex team, I think swept a TT podium in Tour de Suisse, and also Kern Farmer way overperform because of their setup. So I think she's on a pretty rapid setup, and AVV's on Movistar setup, which, I mean, I'm sure it's okay, but I don't think it's the best, and that's why slower speed TTs don't only suit Van Vleuten more because she has better watts per kilo than everybody, but also because aerodynamics are relatively less important than at a 52 km/h average TT. So I think I think Van Dijk takes it. I don't really have any evidence for that. Just gut feeling. I just think she will. This is a big target for her. Royce can also win it. I'm not convinced about AVV. I'm not convinced. Royce also did the Vuelta, um, which just finished the same time as the men's Vuelta. So Van Dyke maybe a slight edge in preparation too. So that's my pick. I'm going Royce second and AVV third.
On one end, I would like to say Von Vleuten wins this time trial, for example, based on the fact that she goes on training before races like the Vuelta stage, for example, to get those extra kilometers in, get that extra work done. But I'm also leaning towards Van Dijk when I see this parkour. I think Ellen Van Dijk wins another World Championships ITT. I think Van Vleuten is going to be second and Reuser third. I might regret that switcheroo. I think yours is more likely to come true, but I'm living on the edge today, so I feel like putting Van Vleuten on the second spot and Royster on the third spot. So that's my podium. I basically low-key agree with you, and
Never nice to
I
see.
yeah, I
hate
don't like
hate to
agreeing
see it.
with this guy. Hate to see it.
Rain, how that will affect things, I think that takes Van Vleuten out of it even more. She will not want to risk the road race or crashing. I think that takes her out of it even more. So wait till see what happens with that. It's this weekend, and it'll be interesting to compare the sectionals between or the time intermediate splits between. I like doing it. I hope they're doing the same loop on U23 and juniors TT, so we can compare. It's always cool when you see a U23 rider did like their intermediate time split. It would have been fifth fastest in the elite race. You're like, ooh, watch out for that rider. Any last thoughts, Benji, before I go to sleep, because I need to head down to Wollongong at some point very soon.
Well, I think it's important to know that the race happening in Australia means that we as Europeans, or I as a European, will have to watch it in the middle of the night. I think it's the women's race is on Sunday at like 1 a.m. until like 4:30 a.m. CEST, and I think 12:30 in the morning to 3:30 in the morning in like British time. That's roughly what I expect it to be. While the men's elite race is the men's elite time trial is like 5 hours later, from like 5:40 a.m. to 9 a.m. in Central European time. So we're looking at rough nights here, but it's a switcheroo
Welcome
from
to
the
my
past, eh?
2020. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, it's so like I actually got almost PTSD. A little bit of story time, why not for everybody? Like I'm back in Balmain where we did the pandemic podcast when it had 3 grand tours in 3 months, and we did that. And then yeah, that was probably the worst period of my life. And for my wife, I'm not kidding. Like, it was
Yeah.
for me and my wife, worst period of our lives, not just because of the podcast and just being back, and also feeling how like I went to the coffee shop that I went to. I haven't been there for 18 months. I haven't been back to Australia, and went in there. They're like, holy shit, you look completely different. Like I haven't lost that much weight, a little bit, decent amount, but they were like, you just don't look fucked. I just walked in there. I'd wake up at I wake up at 1 p.m., walk in there every day, and be like, "Hello," like you need help. But anyway, that was a long story. Happy to be back, and I'm going back to Europe in like a month. For the route reveals, the Giro's doing it normally. I think they're actually getting the scoop on the tour. They're doing it before the tour, and they're doing it on one
Ooh.
day, not what they do it last year, 28 days or something. It's like
Yeah,
there's
but
7 days of Christmas.
they did it in the way that they did like the sprint stages on day
It
one,
was
which is
so
like
fun.
stage
Oh,
four,
it wasn't
stage seven.
chronological.
Oh,
Dude, the
genius.
person who's like, "You know how we get more engagement? Well, 5x the engagement." And actually what they did was they divided the engagement by 50x. Then after the first time, I was like, this is silly. I'll just wait till they're all up. Anyway, if you're going down to Wollongong, let us know the atmosphere when you're there. I won't be there on race day. But yeah, let us know what it's like or any preparations that are going on. And otherwise, we'll see you at the TT recaps this weekend. We'll also recap briefly the juniors and U23s in that potty too. Until then, ciao.